Just recently, I was watching a segment from a podcast, and the topic of discussion was the English language, and it brought up some really fascinating ideas that I wanted to share with you, especially in regards to biblical translations. Specifically, the point was made that Latin words, when used in English, are inferior to Germanic and Anglo-Saxon words. The commentators felt that Latinate words are more liturgical or ethereal in nature. As they put it, Latinate words are large, airy words with many possible interpretations, whereas Germanic words were much more grounded in the literal and the real. You don't need to watch it, but I will put a link to this video below if you're interested, though keep in mind it is not a theological discussion, the commentators are not believers, and there is some small amount of swearing, which sadly seems impossible to avoid these days. Now, this talk of Germanic versus Latin languages sounds like an odd topic for our ministry to be bringing up, and I agree. Or I would have agreed with that right up until the very next day after I heard that podcast and went to Bible study. Now, I was using the King James Bible, whereas the other participants were using some modern translation. The text we were looking at was the first half of Ephesians chapter 4. As they read from their Bibles, I compared it to the King James, and I was truly struck by something. Let's take a look at one particular verse. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 2, in the New International Version, it reads, "Be completely humble and gentle, be patient, bearing with one another in love." Now, humble, gentle, and patient are all Latinate words, and we're all very familiar with these words and what they mean. However, one way I could describe them is moderately generic, and depending on the context, could be a little broad in their meaning. Be humble, gentle, and patient. It's very simple. Now, let's read what the King James says. "With all lowliness and meekness, with long suffering, forbearing one another in love." Now, the word low is Old English, meek is Old Norse, and suffer is Germanic. So let's compare these two sets of words against one another. Humble versus lowliness, gentle versus meekness, patient versus long-suffering. Certainly, these words are all synonyms, and a case could be made that they're basically interchangeable. Except that in this context of an instruction directly from St. Paul to all believers, the word choices here have a profound effect. One set of these words is stronger, more definitive, and more instructive than the other. For example, I have several ideas about what being humble could be, but I have a very real feeling about what lowliness is. I know I have to be gentle while handling something fragile, but what does my life need to look like to be filled with meekness? I know what patience is, but I can see in my mind and feel in my gut what long-suffering is. The modern translation is telling me generally what I should do, while the King James is describing what I need to do. The King James is more tangible, it's more real, it's more instructive, and it's not just these three words. The whole thrust of the verse is so much more urgent and vital. Look at how each verse starts. Be completely has little urgency or strength behind it. And would it surprise you to learn that the word complete is also Latin in origin? We could break this verse down in this way. Be completely humble. Be completely gentle. Be completely patient. Do you feel any urgency or direction or weight behind this? I know I should because I know what the word completely means, but it also comes across to me as, well, just do all of these things. I don't feel put upon to take a sledgehammer to my life and begin rebuilding it in a way that is pleasing to God. But if we read the King James verse in the same way, with all lowliness, with all meekness, with all long-suffering, the urgency immediately grabs you. The need to get to work immediately jumps out at you. Again, it won't surprise you to learn that both words here, with and all, are both Germanic in origin. I chose this one verse to dissect because it was very instructive and easy to point out the superiority of the one and the inferiority of the other. But guess what? The entire King James Bible is like this: evocative, instructive, urgent, weighty, strong, and definitive, where all modern translations are exactly the opposite: airy, weightless, simplistic. At first glance, there doesn't seem to be much difference between these two verses, but once you stop and think about it a little bit, I see one of them as an ornately carved piece of furniture made of beautifully stained walnut, while the other is a soaking wet cardboard box, warped and on the verge of buckling under its own weight. Sure, both of these things are brown and made out of wood, but one is fit for certain tasks that the other is clearly not. After all, this is part of Satan's plan: diffuse the scriptures and all else fails. If the best and only guide to the faith is watered down, dissipated, and all its sharp edges blunted, then surely this works to Satan's advantage. Do you find the Bible doesn't speak to you? Do you find it boring and lackluster, without much to teach or instruct upon your life? Then put down that modern translation and pick up the Bible that has sustained the English-speaking church for over 400 years. Do you think it won't make a difference? I think we've just shown that it can, and you have nothing to lose by the exercise.